What happens when one of television's most outspoken personalities meets her match on live television? It only took 27 seconds for Rosie O'Donnell to go from confident guest to complete meltdown in what would become one of the most shocking moments in talk show history. Picture this. The studio lights are blazing hot. Cameras are rolling. Millions of viewers are watching from home. And sitting across from each other are two people who clearly cannot stand each other. On one side, we have Piers Morgan, the sharp-tongued British host known for his calm demeanor and surgical precision when it comes to difficult interviews. On the other side, Rosie O'Donnell, the former talk show queen who thinks she can walk into any studio and take control. But today, things are about to go very differently than Rosie expected. The interview starts innocently enough. Piers welcomes Rosie to the show with his trademark polite smile. She settles into her chair, looking confident, almost smug. You can tell she thinks this is going to be just another softball interview where she gets to promote whatever project she's working on and maybe throw around some of her famous opinions. "Rosie, welcome to the show," Piers says in his crisp British accent. "It's wonderful to have you here." "Thanks for having me, Piers," Rosie replies, flashing that big smile she's known for. "Great to be here." But Piers isn't planning to make this easy. He's done his homework. He knows exactly which buttons to push, and he's about to start pushing them hard. "Now, Rosie," Piers begins, his voice still friendly, but with just a hint of something sharper underneath. "You've been quite vocal lately about several controversial topics. Some people might say you've become rather difficult to work with. How do you respond to that?" You can see Rosie's smile falter just slightly. This isn't the question she was expecting. She was probably hoping to talk about her latest comedy special or her charity work. Instead, Piers has gone straight for the jugular. "Difficult?" Rosie laughs. "But it doesn't sound quite natural anymore. I think people who say that just don't like strong women who speak their minds." Piers nods thoughtfully, like he's considering her words. But anyone who knows him can see what's coming next. "Interesting," he says, leaning forward slightly, "because I've spoken to several of your former colleagues, and the word that keeps coming up isn't strong. It's actually quite different." The tension in the studio is suddenly thick enough to cut with a knife. Rosie's body language changes completely. Her shoulders tense up. Her smile disappears entirely. She's starting to realize that this interview is not going to go the way she planned. "Oh, really?" she says, and now there's an edge to her voice. "And what word would that be?" Piers doesn't miss a beat. His voice remains calm and professional, but his words hit like a sledgehammer. "Unprofessional," he says simply. Several people use that exact word. They describe someone who throws tantrums when they don't get their way. Someone who makes unreasonable demands. Someone who creates a hostile work environment for everyone around them. The color drains from Rosie's face. She wasn't prepared for this level of directness. Most interviewers treat her with kid gloves, afraid to challenge her because of her reputation for explosive outbursts. But Piers Morgan isn't most interviewers. That's completely untrue," Rosie stammers, but her voice lacks conviction. "I don't know who you've been talking to, but they're lying." "Are they?" Piers asks, raising an eyebrow. "Because I have very specific examples. Would you like me to share them?" This is the moment when you can see Rosie starting to panic. Her eyes dart around the studio like she's looking for an escape route. Her hands start moving nervously. She's beginning to realize that she's walked into a trap, and there's no easy way out. I don't think that's necessary," she says, trying to regain her composure. This is supposed to be a friendly interview, not an ambush. But Piers isn't backing down. If anything, her defensive reaction seems to energize him. "An ambush?" he repeats, with just a hint of amusement in his voice. "Rosie, these are legitimate questions about your professional conduct. Surely someone with your experience can handle a few tough questions." And that's when Rosie makes her first big mistake. Instead of staying calm and professional, instead of trying to deflect with humor or charm, she lets her famous temper start to show. "Listen here, Piers," she says, pointing her finger at him across the desk. "I didn't come on this show to be attacked by some British hack who thinks he knows everything about American television." The studio goes dead quiet. Even the camera operators seem to hold their breath. Piers, meanwhile, looks absolutely delighted. This is exactly the reaction he was hoping for. "A hack," he says, his voice still maddeningly calm. "That's interesting, because last I checked, I'm not the one whose talk show got canceled for declining ratings and behind-the-scenes drama. It's a brutal hit, and everyone in the studio knows it." Rosie's face turns bright red. Her mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. She's clearly struggling to come up with a response that doesn't make her look even worse. "My show wasn't canceled," she finally manages to say. I chose to end it. Piers gives her a look that says he doesn't believe that for a second. Of course you did, he says with a slight smirk. Just like you chose to leave The View after all that unpleasantness with the other hosts. Now Rosie is really getting worked up. Her voice starts to rise, and you can see her losing control in real time. That's not what happened, she shouts. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Piers asks calmly. Because from where I'm sitting, I see a pattern. A pattern of someone who can't get along with colleagues. Someone who blames everyone else when things go wrong. Someone who throws public tantrums when they don't get their way. Each word hits Rosie like a physical blow. She's completely off balance now. All her media training forgotten in the face of Piers' relentless assault. You're being completely unfair, she protests, her voice cracking slightly. This is character assassination. No, Piers says, his voice still steady and professional. This is journalism. This is what happens when someone with your public profile faces actual scrutiny instead of the usual softball questions you're used to. And that's when you can see something snap inside Rosie. All pretense of being the gracious guest disappears completely. Her face contorts into an expression of pure rage. She leans forward in her chair, pointing aggressively at Piers with both hands now. You know what? She snarls. This is exactly the kind of sexist garbage I'm talking about. You wouldn't dare speak to a male guest this way. But Piers doesn't even blink. He's dealt with much tougher opponents than an unhinged talk show host. Actually, Rosie, he says with infuriating calm, I speak to all my guests the same way. I ask them tough questions. I challenge them when they say things that don't add up. That's what real journalists do. Real journalists? Rosie practically screams. You're a tabloid hack who got lucky. You think because you have a British accent, people will think you're smart? The insult hangs in the air for a moment. Piers actually smiles, which seems to make Rosie even angrier. Well, he says thoughtfully, I suppose we'll let the viewers decide who sounds more intelligent right now. It's a masterful response. Without raising his voice or losing his cool, Piers has essentially invited the audience to compare his measured professionalism with Rosie's increasingly erratic behavior, and the comparison is not flattering to Rosie. But she's too far gone now to recognize the trap she's walking deeper into. The viewers know the truth, she shouts. They know I've been fighting for important causes while you've been writing gossip about celebrities. Important causes, Piers repeats, nodding slowly. Like your very public feuds with other celebrities? Is that what you consider important? Rosie's mouth drops open. She clearly wasn't expecting him to turn her own words against her so quickly. Those weren't feuds, she protests weakly. Those were standing up for what's right. Standing up for what's right, Piers echoes. By calling people names on television? By making personal attacks? By using your platform to bully people who disagree with you? Each question hits harder than the last. Rosie looks like she's been physically slapped. Her confidence is completely shattered now. I never bullied anyone, she says, but her voice is small and defensive. No? Piers pulls out a piece of paper. Because I have several examples right here of you doing exactly that. Would you like me to read them? The paper might be blank for all we know, but Rosie doesn't call his bluff. She just sits there, trapped and furious. This is ridiculous, she mutters. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. Then leave, Piers says simply. No one's forcing you to stay. But if you do leave, everyone watching will know exactly why. It's a brilliant move. By giving her an out, Piers has actually made it impossible for her to take it. If she storms off now, she'll look like exactly what he's been suggesting she is. Someone who can't handle criticism. Rosie realizes this too. You can see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But she's backed herself into a corner, and Piers knows it. I came here in good faith, she says finally. I thought we were going to have a real conversation. We are having a real conversation, Piers replies. This is what real conversations look like. They involve difficult questions and honest answers, not rehearsed talking points and empty platitudes. Honest answers? Rosie laughs bitterly. You want honest answers? Fine. Here's an honest answer. You're a nasty, vindictive little man who gets his kicks from tearing people down. The studio audience gasped audibly. Even for Rosie, this is a shocking level of personal attack on live television. But Piers just smiles wider. There we go, he says pleasantly. Now we're seeing the real Rosie O'Donnell. Not the carefully crafted public persona, but the person your colleagues have to deal with behind the scenes. Rosie realizes immediately that she's been played. Her outburst has just proven every point Piers was making about her unprofessional behavior. You set me up, she says quietly. I asked you questions, Piers corrects. You chose how to respond to them, and your responses have been quite illuminating. The word hangs in the air like a death sentence. Rosie knows she's lost this battle completely. Every word out of her mouth has only made things worse for her. "This interview is over," she announces, starting to remove her microphone. "Actually," Piers says calmly, "we still have 15 minutes left. And I think the viewers would be very interested to hear your thoughts on some of the specific incidents I mentioned earlier." Rosie freezes. She's caught between her desire to flee and her realization that leaving now will only confirm everything Piers has been saying about her. "What incidents?" she asks warily. Piers shuffles through his papers with theatrical precision. "Well, there's the incident where you allegedly screamed at a production assistant until she cried. There's the time you demanded that an entire catering company be fired because they served the wrong type of sandwich. And then there's the rather unfortunate situation with your former makeup artist." Each revelation hits like a hammer blow. Rosie's face cycles through shock, anger, and something that looks almost like fear. "Those are lies," she whispers. "Are they?" Piers asks. "Because I have witnesses, I have documentation, I have people who are willing to go on record about what it was really like to work with you." This is the moment when Rosie realizes the full extent of how thoroughly she's been outmaneuvered. This wasn't just a tough interview. This was an execution. "You can't prove any of that," she says, but her voice is barely above a whisper now. "Actually, I can," Piers responds, his tone still infuriatingly calm. "In fact, I've already spoken to 3 different witnesses who are willing to corroborate these stories, people who worked with you directly." Rosie's hands are shaking now. The confident, brash personality who walked onto this stage has been completely stripped away, leaving behind someone who looks genuinely frightened. "This is a hit job," she accuses. "You planned this whole thing." "I prepared for this interview, yes," Piers admits without shame. "That's what professionals do. They research their subjects. They ask informed questions. They don't just show up and wing it." The implied criticism cuts deep. Everyone watching can see the contrast between Piers' meticulous preparation and Rosie's obvious lack of readiness for serious scrutiny. "You're enjoying this," Rosie says bitterly. "You're getting off on destroying me on live television." Piers considers this for a moment, tilting his head thoughtfully. "You know what, Rosie? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am enjoying this, but not for the reason you think." He leans forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm enjoying finally seeing someone who has spent years bullying others get a taste of what it feels like to be on the receiving end. I'm enjoying watching someone who has built their career on attacking people finally face some consequences." The words land like physical blows. Rosie actually flinches. "I never bullied anyone," she repeats weakly, but even she doesn't seem to believe it anymore. "The makeup artist you had fired because she couldn't cover up your hangover well enough," Piers continues relentlessly. "The young intern you screamed at for bringing you the wrong coffee? The wardrobe assistant you reduced to tears because your dress didn't fit properly?" With each example, Rosie seems to shrink further into her chair. Her earlier bravado has completely evaporated. "Stop," she whispers. "The pregnant production coordinator you berated until she had to take stress leave," Piers continues, showing no mercy. "The elderly security guard you humiliated in front of the entire crew. The teenage page you called stupid for not knowing where the bathroom was." "Stop it," Rosie shouts. But there's no fight left in her voice. It's the desperate cry of someone who has been completely defeated. "These are real people, Rosie," Piers says, his voice carrying genuine emotion for the first time. "Real people with real feelings who had to deal with your tantrums and your cruelty. People who couldn't fight back because they needed their jobs." Tears are forming in Rosie's eyes now. The tough facade she's maintained for decades is crumbling in real time. I was under a lot of pressure," she stammers. "You don't know what it's like." "Pressure?" Piers raises an eyebrow. "So pressure gives you the right to abuse people who can't defend themselves? Is that your excuse?" "It's not an excuse," Rosie says quietly. It's complicated." "No, it's not complicated at all," Piers responds firmly. "It's actually very simple. You treated people badly because you could get away with it, because you had power and they didn't." The studio is dead silent. Even the camera operators seem transfixed by this complete dismantling of someone who was once considered untouchable. "What do you want from me?" Rosie asks, her voice breaking. "Do you want me to apologize? Do you want me to grovel?" "I want you to tell the truth," Piers says simply. "For once in your career, just tell the truth about who you really are." Rosie stares at him for a long moment. You can see her wrestling with herself, trying to decide whether to keep fighting or finally surrender. "Fine," she says finally. "You want the truth? Here's the truth. Yes, I lost my temper sometimes. Yes, I was demanding. But that's what it takes to get things done in this business. Demanding, Piers repeats. Is that what you call making a young woman cry because she brought you lukewarm soup? That was one incident, Rosie protests. It was one of dozens, Piers counters. And the fact that you can dismiss it so easily tells us everything we need to know about your character. Rosie opens her mouth to argue, then closes it again. She knows she's beaten. Every word she says just digs the hole deeper. This conversation is over, she announces, standing up abruptly. Actually, Piers says calmly, not moving from his chair, it's just getting started. We still have several more incidents to discuss. I'm leaving, Rosie declares, pulling off her microphone with shaking hands. Of course you are, Piers says with a knowing smile. Because that's what you do when things get difficult, isn't it? You run away. You blame everyone else. You never take responsibility for your actions. Rosie freezes halfway out of her chair. The words hit her like a slap across the face. I take responsibility, she says through gritted teeth. Do you? Piers challenges. Then sit back down and let's finish this conversation like adults. For a moment, it looks like Rosie might actually sit back down. But then her pride kicks in one last time. Go to hell, she snarls, and storms toward the exit. But Piers gets the last word, as he always does. Ladies and gentlemen, he says, turning to face the camera as Rosie's footsteps echo off stage. That was the real Rosie O'Donnell, not the carefully crafted public persona, but the person her colleagues have had to deal with for years. I think we can all see why so many people found her difficult to work with. The camera holds on Piers' calm, professional face as the sound of a door slamming echoes through the studio. In just under 30 minutes, he has completely dismantled one of entertainment's most notorious personalities, exposing the ugly truth beneath the celebrity facade. And he did it all without raising his voice, without losing his temper, and without stooping to her level. It was a masterclass in how to handle a difficult interview subject, and a perfect example of what happens when someone who has spent years bullying others finally meets their match. The silence that follows is deafening. The studio audience sits in stunned, quiet, processing what they've just witnessed. This wasn't just an interview. This was a reckoning. This was accountability, finally catching up with someone who thought they were untouchable. And Piers Morgan, with his surgical precision and unflappable demeanor, had delivered it all with the calm professionalism of a true master of his craft.